didn't write your resume, but civil rights made somebody read your resume.
For all. With over 100 chapters across the country, it is a national movement for equality rooted in the spirit and tradition of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Despite the extreme challenges of 2020, NAN redoubled its activism and efforts to fight for the voiceless and push for change at the highest levels possible. In January, NAN kicked the year off with its annual King Day breakfast in Washington, D.C., featuring former President Bill Clinton, as well as dignitaries like Martin Luther King III and others. While at its headquarters in Harlem, New York, they convened their yearly public policy forum with elected officials and throngs of public support. NAN's Irvington, New Jersey chapter hosted a 2020 census workshop educating people on the significance of participation. Chapters across the nation encourage people to fill out the census to ensure that everyone is indeed counted. Following the South Carolina Democratic debate, Reverend Sharpton and NAN hosted a minister's breakfast featuring candidates such as Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, and others.
Thank God we have all of you in this room, but also particularly Jim, because he reminds us of who we are. What you're doing, at least to my brethren, you're doing to me. That's what it's about. That's how I was raised.
The breakfast focused on creating a civil rights agenda for 2020 and beyond, as well as helping to mobilize black churches ahead of the pivotal presidential election. NAN's annual Western Regional Conference convened chapter members from California, Arizona, and Nevada to address issues impacting marginalized and minority communities. The conference included plenary sessions as well as a Rock the Vote concert presented by NAN's California Youth Huddle. As the catastrophic COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States, NAN stepped up its efforts to help those most devastated from the impact. The Harlem headquarters teamed up with Sylvia's Restaurant and World Central Kitchen to distribute meals to the thousands in need. NAN's efforts to feed the hungry expanded to New Jersey, South Carolina, California, Florida, Michigan, and elsewhere. These initiatives continued for months, and NAN distributed over 1 million meals across the nation. The NAN Tallahassee chapter partnered with the Capital City Chamber of Commerce to provide small business grants to those suffering hardship due to the pandemic. Meanwhile, the NAN Sacramento chapter teamed up with Lyft and the Sacramento Food Bank to help deliver resources. And in Detroit, NAN provided groceries and medical deliveries to those in need. The Atlanta chapter even launched a COVID relief fund. As the global pandemic raged, the fight for police reform continued as well, and NAN was at the forefront, leading the way. The Louisville chapter hosted a press conference in front of the courthouse to demand justice for Breonna Taylor, who was shot and killed by police as she slept in her bed.
We're here to bring people together, and it starts locally. All politics start at the local level. So, Mayor, we are telling you today, we are demanding you today that you be a fearless, courageous leader. Stand up to the enemy. Stand up for what you know in your heart is right.
After the gruesome police killing of George Floyd, Reverend Sharpton met with his family members and stood alongside grieving loved ones. He delivered a powerful eulogy at Floyd's funeral, calling out systemic racism and the need for police reform.
Ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed of being is you kept your knee on our neck. We were smarter than the underfunded schools you put us in, but you had your knee on our neck. We could run corporations and not hustle in the street, but you had your knee on our neck. We had creative skills. We could do whatever anybody else could do, but we couldn't get your knee off our neck. What happened to Floyd happens every day in this country, in education, in health services, and in every area of American life. It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks. God always uses unlikely people to do his will. If George Floyd had been an Ivy League school graduate and one of these ones with a long title, we would have been accused of reacting to his prominence. If he'd been a multimillionaire, they would have said that we were reacting to his wealth. If he had been famous athlete, as he was on the trajectory to be, we would have said we were reacting to his fame. But God took an ordinary brother from the third wall, from the housing projects that nobody thought much about but those that knew him and loved him. He took the rejected stone, the stone that the builder rejected. They rejected him for jobs. They rejected him for positions. They rejected him to play certain teams. God took the rejected stone and made him the cornerstone of a movement that's going to change the whole wide world.
His words galvanized the nation and sparked a new intergenerational, interracial movement in the fight for social justice. He announced NAN's Commitment March on Washington. The Get Your Knee Off Our Necks rally took place on August 28th, coinciding with the 57th anniversary of Dr. King's March on Washington.
This is the time for legislative change. This is the time for us to vote like we never voted before. And don't just vote for the top of the ticket. Vote all the way down. Go down from the top to the bottom. Vote all the way to the dog catcher. We want to get rid of anybody that's in our way, because our parents died to give us the right to vote. You can mess with the mail, but it ain't the sacrifice that Goodman and Cheney and Swerner gave. Our vote is dipped in blood. Our vote is dipped in those that went to their grave. We don't care how long the line. We don't care what you do. We're going to vote not for one candidate or the other, but we're going to vote for a nation that'll stop the George Floyds, that'll stop the Breonna Taylor.
The march drew over 200,000 people to the nation's capital. NAN took the unprecedented steps of handing out masks, conducting temperature checks, and urging people to social distance as they rallied for justice.
We have mastered the selfie and TikTok. Now we must master ourselves. Less than a year before he was assassinated, my grandfather predicted this very moment. He said that we were moving into a new phase of the struggle. The first phase was the civil rights, and the new phase is genuine equality. Genuine equality is why we are here today and why people are coming together all across the world, from New Zealand to New Jersey. He said that we must not forget the days of Montgomery. We must not forget the sit-ins movement. We must not forget the Freedom Rides, the Birmingham movement, and Selma. Papa King, we won't!
I wish George were here to see this right now. That's who I'm marching for. I'm marching for George, for Breonna, for Ahmaud, for Jacob, for Pamela Turner, for Michael Brown. Trayvon, and anybody else who lost their lives are too evil. It's never been more clear than change right now. It's happening right now because we demand it. Everyone here has made a commitment because they wouldn't be here for no other reason right now. Everybody out here right now, our leaders, they need to follow us while we're marching to enact laws to protect us.
For coming out here and continuing to say her name louder. What we need is change, and we're at a point where we can get that change, but we have to stand together. We have to vote.
During a critical election year, NAN's Ohio chapter created a Get Out the Vote commercial. As the South Carolina chapter marched to Senator Lindsey Graham's office to demand support for voting and policing legislation. Chapters across the country encourage voter registration and participation. At a time of intense voter suppression, NAN increased its efforts to push back against draconian measures designed to disenfranchise black voters. Following the election, Reverend Sharpton and NAN were signatories to a coalition of civil rights leaders demanding that all votes be counted. Reverend Sharpton then wrote a letter to Congressional Black Caucus Chairwoman Karen Bass asking her to prioritize black health equity in 2021. In Newark, New Jersey, NAN's Tech Center, under the leadership of Northeast Regional Director Reverend Steffi Bartley, blossomed into a staple in the community. The Tech Center provided laptops to students and played a critical role in helping them get up to speed as the country moved to virtual learning. In this challenging year, Reverend Sharpton also released his long-awaited book, Rise Up, Confronting a Country at the Crossroads. A rousing call to action, the book draws on his decades of experience fighting the good fight. Across its various chapters, NAN's youth members have also been recognized for their immense contributions and received various awards for their work. In 2020, NAN formalized its Youth and College Division to continue to empower the visionary voices of young activists. NAN's Youth Huddle made the pivot to a virtual format and have been conducting a Operation Save Ourselves series in its weekly forums. We remember Baltimore, Maryland youth leader David Carter, an energetic and committed young man who died earlier this year. May he rest in peace and power. The organization's commitment to serving those in need has never waned. This year, like every year before, NAN provided Thanksgiving meals to those in need at its Harlem headquarters as well as at the Atlanta office. Under the leadership of NAN's Executive Vice President and General Counsel, Michael A. Hardy, NAN continues to host Legal Night. Launched around 10 years ago, Attorney Hardy and a team of lawyers provide a forum where individuals can have their legal questions addressed for free. In the year of COVID-19, the forum has been held virtually, creating an online space for the dissemination of legal assistance. After November's historic presidential election, which resulted in the nation's first woman and person of color to serve as vice president, NAN committed to helping the administration tackle critical issues that impact the country in general and communities of color in particular. NAN was quick to call for an end to the filibuster on Capitol Hill and applauded the administration's common sense approach to gun reform and comprehensive focus on infrastructure. We've been encouraged by the administration's attention to ensuring that the COVID-19 vaccine is distributed equitably in poor and working class communities of color. In an effort to encourage individuals to become vaccinated, Reverend Sharpton joined forces with political leaders in New York City and African American leaders across the nation in encouraging widespread vaccination. Despite progress, however, challenges remain. In the wake of the election of two Georgia Democrats, Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, we have witnessed the ongoing assault on voting rights in the Peach State. The coordinated effort, led by Governor Brian Kemp, is designed to suppress the right to vote. It is a devastating reminder that we have not yet moved beyond the dark history of voter suppression in this country.
Pressure on the U.S. Senate to pass, which was H.R. 1 and 4, which is now Senate 1, this bill to deal with federal voting laws. And I think that clearly we are where we were 40 years ago in the civil rights movement when I was just a little kid, where you need federal law to supersede the state laws. Because what we're looking at now is states' rights on voting. The Senate must establish national voting rights laws.
As Dr. King reminded us all, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He continued, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Since its foundation 30 years ago, NAN has worked in the spirit and tradition of Dr. King to promote a modern civil rights agenda. Reverend Sharpton was just a boy preacher at the age of 12 when he first began working with the SCLC's Operation Breadbasket. It was there that he met Reverend Jesse Jackson, who Dr. King had appointed as Operation Breadbasket's national director.
Of all of the time I spent with my own two sons, I maybe spent more time with Al than any of them because of our, Yusuf says, our spiritual connection. It's not by blood, but by spirit. Yeah. And I want to thank him for standing with me and my family down through the years and recognizing our struggle. There's no other movement in America like NAN today. Nothing like NAN in the country. Dr. King came back, his first stop would be right here. You are his people.
The fight for equality and justice that Dr. King embarked upon was carried forward by Reverend Jackson to Reverend Sharpton and NAN's future leaders. It is in that spirit that NAN was quick to condemn the recent attacks against Asian Americans throughout the nation. It is the reason why NAN called for justice and the arrest of a California woman who physically attacked and falsely accused Keon Harrell Jr., a young man staying at the Arlo Hotel in New York City with his father, of stealing her cell phone. As the late Elie Wiesel reminded us, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. NAN lost a number of members, friends, supporters, and champions since our last convention. We remember them all. These giants include stalwarts of the civil rights movement such as Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery, Reverend C.T. Vivian, and Congressman John Lewis. It was during Congressman Lewis's remarks in Selma at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge that Reverend Sharpton helped to hold the civil rights icon up as he urged Americans to stay in the fight and to create, quote, good trouble. It would be the last time Congressman Lewis visited the site of Bloody Sunday. We also remember Cicely Tyson and Vernon Jordan, whose legacy and impact will be felt for many generations to come. And NAN is just getting started. Whether it's holding leaders accountable, feeding those in need, fighting on behalf of victims of police brutality, or inspiring the next generation of civil rights advocates, National Action Network is ready for the next 30 years and beyond.
Good morning. Well, welcome to National Action Network's 2021 convention. Even in the pandemic, we have our chapter leaders and delegates from around the country and thousands watching virtual. As we begin the proceedings, let me say that we want you to stay with us throughout the day. And then, of course, this evening, everyone must be present for the Keepers of the Dream ceremony. We cannot serve food in, but we want you to be here for Martin Luther King III and our honorees tonight, this evening at 6. And all day, Ben Crump will be leading 2 workshops, voter suppression workshops. You'll be having virtual speakers. Let me say that I want to acknowledge the work of our staff and others, and I'll be doing that throughout the weekend, throughout the next 4 days. We have our chapter leaders from around the country, from Regina Hunt is here from Kansas City, Janique Curry, Buffalo, Dr. October Hudley from Irvington, New Jersey, Stephanie Jackson, Newburgh, North Carolina, Marcia McCoy from Cleveland, Ohio, Reverend DeCoy Porter, Sacramento's here, from our Washington, D.C. chapter, Nia 2X, from Los Angeles, Reverend Dr. K.W. Toulis, our Northeast Regional Director, Steffi Bartley, our Atlantic City Director, chapter leader, just opened a new office, hasn't invited me yet, but I got the word that Stephen Young, Anthony Allen from Houston, Texas, chapter and national board member Sheila Tyson, Birmingham, Alabama, Baltimore, Maryland, the godfather of the network, Larry Young, from Brooklyn, New York, my pastor, Reverend Adolphus Lacey, Latisse Cook from Austin, Texas, Warren Ellington from Macon, Georgia, the director of Los Angeles, California, the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mosley, Imani McCurry from Kansas City, Jasmine McCurry, Tiffany James from Columbia, South Carolina, and Sylvia Coleman from New Jersey, Cynthia Dawkins from Newark, William Franklin Richardson III from Port St. Lucie, Florida, Porter Peoples from Philadelphia, Matthew Smith from Philadelphia, Warren Ellington from Philadelphia, Warren Ellington's from Macon, Walt Dixie from Syracuse, Don Tolliver from Tallahassee, Florida, Felicia Simmons from Asbury Park, and we have delegates here from Utah, Alabama, and Macon. So these are just a few who registered. The good news we have, you have 2 things in common. All of you are leaders and members of National Action Network, and all of you are COVID-free because you wouldn't have got in here if you wouldn't. We had the protocol for the hotel is you had to be tested to come up, so we can feel free that we know you are COVID tested or have gotten a vaccine. So we're going to ask our chapter leaders to come across the front. We want to cut the ribbon, then we're going to hear and do what we have the President of the United States and others that will address us virtually. Give a hand to our chapter leaders from all over the country. Reverend, my pastor Lacey got a brand new bow tie on for this occasion. All right, we have officially cut the ribbon. Let it begin. Give yourselves a big hand. Let us hear, before we start, our virtual officials from the chairman of the board, who has led us gallantly and with great vision. We could not have had a better chairman of the board than we have. When National Action Network started 30 years ago, our first chairman of the board was Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. Dr. Walker was the executive director in the early 60s for Dr. King. And we were honored and felt it was providential that since this organization, even in its mission statement, says that we operate in the spirit of Dr. King, that his executive director was our first chairman. When he became ill and had to begin, his schedule began to have to be altered, including his duties as pastor of Canaan Baptist Church. He asked Dr. Richardson, who was vice chair of the board, to take over, and Dr. Richardson has been with us ever since as chairman and has helped develop and govern. This is not a board in name, it is a real board with real compliance and real governing power. And we will later this year, after COVID has died down, have a large 30th anniversary celebration, but as of March, this organization's 30 years old, and we've come the last 15 years under the chairmanship of Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson. Not only does he pastor Grace Baptist Church and chair National Action Network, he chairs the Board of Trustees for Virginia Union University. So let us hear from our chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to all of the members of the board of National Action Network, and to our chapter leaders, and to all of you who have gathered here today. I'm delighted to continue this relationship with an extraordinary leader who has taken us into a whole new era of engagement and empowerment in the person of our organizer, founder, the Reverend Al Sharpton. Let's celebrate him. He is just spectacular. And I'm privileged to have his partnership in multiple activities, and his friendship is a tremendous cherish to me. I want to celebrate his family, his daughters and grandchild, and all of them who make this a real solid community. Let me tell you, the fact that we are gathered here is indicative of the resolve of the National Action Network. National Action Network is determined to not be obstructed in our pursuit for justice and equality. And the very fact that we are having our convention virtually in these tough and difficult circumstances is an illustration of how resolved we are and how committed we are to the mission of full equality and justice for all people in this nation, particularly African Americans. And so give yourselves a hand that you showed up in this environment, in this climate, in this time of challenge. I quickly want to say, I'm not going to give a speech, but I quickly want to say a couple things. One is, there is in the ancient text a statement made by Jeremiah that says, the harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. He goes on to say that the prophet looks, he says, my heart is dark and astonishment has overtaken me. And then he raises this rhetorical question, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? The truth of the matter is that while we come year in, year out in these challenging times, we come realizing that even though we've made great progress, and there can be no question about the progress that African Americans have made, and we must not ever downplay how successful we have been, because no other people could have survived what we've had to go through. Nobody else could have done what we've done with so little. So do not feel inferior. Do not feel destabilizing. Understand that we have a lot to celebrate. We have come a mighty long ways. 400 years of slavery and resistance and oppression. But we've come through. And you and I who sit here today, we are living evidence that we are survivors. And we must emphasize that every step. But at the same time, we must pay attention to the fact that even though all that has happened, we have not yet fulfilled our potential and promise. Like that ancient prophet Jeremiah, he looks around at the famine and the despair of his people, and he says, the harvest is past, the summer's ended, and we're not saved. That means that the things that should have delivered us have failed us. The things that should have produced our full participation have failed us. He says, we have planted. Well, you know, when you plant, it's a reasonable expectation that you're going to see some harvest. Nobody plants expecting the seeds to stay in the ground. They expect the seeds to bring forth fruit. And when you sacrifice and plant, when you dig and plant and water and cultivate and make sure the sunlight, you are expecting that you're going to get a harvest. African American people have been planting in this state. We're not Johnny-come-latelys in America. We've always been here. We're the first one to die in 1776 in Crispus Attucks. We've always been here. We didn't show up here. We've been here from the very foundation of this nation. And we have been planting all the time. The problem is that though we've been planting, we have not received the harvest. And the reason we didn't receive the harvest is the people who picked up the harvest kept all the harvest for themselves and kept the money and kept the resources. And so we have been able to have to struggle without resources because we were restricted from receiving the harvest of the seeds we had planted. Our efforts have not been paid for. That's why we speak of reparations. We speak of it because we've never been acknowledged. We've never received resources. You talk about old money. Old money is the money that the white people kept from the black people for their free labor. Old money is our money. Old money is the money we did not get for the sacrifices we made to build this country. On our backs, the cotton gin became a vehicle for our liberation and forged the greatest economic economy in the history of the world on the backs of black people who did not get anything for what they did. The harvest is past. We've watched legislations come year after year after year. We've watched new laws pass. We've been protesting. We've been marching. We organized organizations. We've written books. We've done everything that you could to bring attention to the injustice that has risen in this country. And yet, here this morning, there is great inequality. The fight still goes on. The harvest is past. The things that should have produced results have passed. And we are not saved. We're not saved by every measure of equality, every measure of human existence. No matter what you look at, every measure of quality of life, black people are at the bottom. Whether it's education, health, infant mortality, AIDS, obesity, jobs, home ownership, every measure of quality of life in African American communities is diminished. We have not been saved. We have been ostracized, rejected, and denied. We are not saved. We've not realized our potential, and yet we planted. We didn't just show up here. And we're not going back. We're not going back to Africa. Matter of fact, we're not going back to Africa until the Italians go back to Italy, and the French go back to France, and the Spanish go back to Spain, and the Jews go back to Jerusalem. We're not going back. And even then, we still ain't going back because we have invested and we claim our place and our space in this nation. Harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. We're still marginalized. We're still denied. The National Action Network has not lost focus on the fact that there's still gross inequities in America. And it's no more manifested in the killings of our sons and daughters by the police of the state, unjustly killing our sons and daughters. It is evident, right as we sit here today, the courts are filled of cases that are being addressed, because of the maltreatment of black people by the police. We're not saved. Even after having a black man as president for 2 terms with an impeccable record, and having brought the country, declared by some to be the best president was in the history of America, and yet we are not saved. With 60 African Americans in Congress, we are not saved. With new laws on the books, we are not saved. With thousands protesting, 200,000 at the march last year, we are not saved. We still have not reached our opportunity. Do not go to sleep. Wake up. We are not saved. The harvest is past, the summer's ended, and we are not saved. That passage means that harvest, there was a spring harvest. And when the spring harvest came, there was no results. And then he said there was a summer harvest. So usually if the harvest in the spring didn't come through, the harvest in the summer would come through. And when the harvest didn't come through, both the spring and the summer harvest, the writer says, and we are not saved. The harvest has been. I challenge us this day. I challenge us as colleagues in the National Action Network, partners for justice. I challenge us to not lose focus and not be rocked to sleep and act like everything is okay. We are the radical voice of African Americans for justice in this country. And God has blessed us to have the stage. The National Action Network is the strongest, most effective civil rights organization in this country today, under the leadership of Reverend Al Sharpton. We must not go asleep. The cemeteries are full of too many victims who've given their lives, who are depending on us to make sure that their lives have not been given for nothing. Too many sons and daughters have been destroyed, and we must make sure they have not been forgotten. We must make sure that sacrifice, their blood, was not wasted blood. Harvest is finished. Harvest is over. The summer's ended, and we're not saved. Jeremiah says, he says, my heart is dark. Every black person ought to have a dark heart, given the circumstances we face. The heart, he says, my heart is dark. Blackness has overtaken me, astonishment. And then he raises this rhetorical question, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Is there no remedy? You see, the balm in Gilead was the medicinal town, and all the doctors lived in Gilead. And they gathered the medicines, and the medicines provided cure for sicknesses. America is rich, abundant, the richest country in the history of the world. But is there no balm? Is there no justice for us? America has everything, more than anything in the world, but is there no balm? I contend to you that there is a balm in Gilead. And the balm is us. We the balm. The National Action Network, we the balm. African Americans who had a resolve to be free, we are the balm. We the balm. We are the answer. We are our own answer. We must fight on 4 prongs. Education. We must see to it that our children have competence. Our children study. We must save historically black colleges. We must foster economic leverage. We must not spend our money with people who will not support us or work against us, who use the money to fight, to support Trumpism in this nation. We must be careful where we spend our money. Not only economic and educational, but more than ever, political engagement. from public policy to new legislation to voting. Let me tell you, even in this upcoming election in New York, the primary, they're expecting us to stay home. And when we stay home, they get their way. There's an emerging movement in New York and across the country. You may not be aware, but it's counter to our movement. It looks like us, but it ain't us. It talks like us, but it ain't us. It doesn't have our objectives. It doesn't have us as a priority. And we must stand up and go out to the polls more than ever before. No election, you heard Reverend in the film clip, no election can we afford to count, dismiss. Whether it's a dog catcher's election, we got to turn out numbers like never before. Because we the bomb. We are the bomb. We are the difference. And then we must maintain our spiritual consciousness. Remember that we've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord. We must pray on our knees and then get up off our knees and live out our prayer on our feet. We are National Action Network, not procrastination network, but Action Network. We don't just pray in the symbolisms of the rituals. We rise up, and we rise up to the potential. Is there a bomb in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain, but then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. Yes, there is a bomb in Gilead. There is a physician there, and we, you and me, the National Action Network, we are the bomb.
Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, give him a hand. Let us begin with some virtual addresses. First, let us hear from the President of the United States of America, President Joseph Biden.
Hey, Rev, I wish we could be together in person, but I do want to congratulate you on 30 years of the National Action Network, and thank you for your friendship, your partnership, and most of all, your courageous advocacy through these years. This organization has always been an essential voice, but never more essential than it is today. Upholding and advancing the security and prosperity of health and well-being, dignity and possibilities of all Black Americans. It's time, at a time when the pandemic and the economic crisis continue to devastate Black communities, at a time when the cry for justice, 400 years in the making, is ringing out across our nation, at a time when parts of our country are backsliding into the days of Jim Crow, passing laws that harken back to the era of poll taxes, when Black people were made to guess how many jelly beans in a jar, or count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap before they could cast their ballot. This was un-American then, and it's un-American today. But you're fighting. You're fighting for the soul of America, Rev. And Kamala and I are proud to stand with you. We're proud to pass the American Rescue Plan, which is helping us beat the pandemic and deliver checks into Americans' pockets. That law, on its own, is projected to cut poverty in the Black community by 37%. But from my perspective, it's only the beginning. My American Jobs Plan will make generational investments in rebuilding America, delivering good jobs, equity, and opportunity to Black neighborhoods that never seem to get dealt in on the American dream. Replacing every lead drinking water pipe in America so that you never have to worry about another Flint. Delivering high-speed internet access to every American home, and building an economy that sees values and pays our caregivers, so many of whom are Black women. We have so much work to do, from criminal justice to police reform to addressing health disparities and voting rights. But I know that together we're going to continue to make extraordinary progress. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Congratulations, and God bless you.
President Joe Biden. Now we have a message from the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Senator Chuck Schumer.
Hello, National Action Network, and this is Senator Chuck Schumer. I want to thank my dear and longtime friend, a champion of civil rights, a fighter for justice for our country, the Reverend Al Sharpton, for letting me join today. We all know that the Reverend's impact on our country has been immense. He has driven the conversation on the most important issues of our time: civil rights, economic justice, policing reform, the fight for our democracy. Like you, I am so grateful for his leadership over all these years. And congratulations to the National Action Network for 30 years of standing up for the cause of justice in America. Now, friends, it's been a hard 12 months, but I do believe our country is turning the corner. Earlier this month, I was proud, as Majority Leader, to lead the passage of the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion package that President Biden just signed into law. Democrats promised bold action on COVID relief, and we delivered. We delivered on raising stimulus checks from $600 up to $2,000 per person. A family of 4 will see checks for up to $5,600. We delivered on expanded unemployment benefits, extended now till the fall, $300 more than you'd get simply from the state. We delivered on helping families afford the basics, money for rental assistance, SNAP benefits for groceries, funding for mass transit, and tax credit for child care assistance. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of, the vast majority of parents will now receive $3,000 per child under 18 through the expanded tax credit. Parents with kids under 6 will get $3,600, and they'll start seeing these checks mailed regularly to them on a monthly basis this summer. For Black-owned businesses, nonprofits, and churches, Reverend Sharpton made sure I put the churches in, and they're in. We have expanded PPP to make sure they get the help they need and deserve. A lot of our small minority-owned businesses and churches haven't had access to these programs, and now there are people, navigators, who can guide them how to get them. Both NAN and my office will have their phone numbers, and they will be ready to serve. Please let them know. And of course, we provided billions to supercharge our nation's vaccine effort, making it free for all people, and assuring that communities of color go to the front of the line, not the back. In fact, I made sure that community health centers had full access to the vaccines, and they are in our communities, and there's no muss or fuss when people line up to get the vaccine. So in so many ways, help is on the way. And together, I promise we will not return just to the normal we had before the pandemic. We must rebuild our country where justice, democracy, and opportunity is a reality for all people, where we protect our sacred right to vote. Just last month, I introduced S1, the For the People Act, and I promise we will soon take action on the floor of the Senate, and we will get it done. We will rebuild our country so that police reform and real justice extends to all people, like working to pass the Justice in Policing Act, again, where NAN was of great guidance. So was Ben Crump. And we will rebuild our country to fight economic inequality, like canceling student debt up to $50,000 and pushing for legislation like the Thrive Agenda to invest billions in our communities. And I will continue to push that people of color get appointed to high positions. I was just lucky enough to appoint 3 African Americans to the 3 powerful U.S. attorney positions in New York State. The Southern District, Damian Williams, the first African American to occupy that post. Breon Peace in Brooklyn, whose father was a preacher in Brooklyn, and Trini Ross, well known, well respected in the Buffalo area. Now, none of this will be easy, but every day I serve as Majority Leader, I promise I'll stand in your corner. So thank you, National Action Network. Thanks for being a voice for justice, a voice for progress, and a voice for all the people of America. Thank you so much for doing all that you do, and my very best in the weeks and months ahead.
Senator Schumer, and I think that is very important what he announced. This is the first time we've seen that a senator has nominated 3 African Americans in the 3 federal districts in the state of New York to be the new U.S. attorneys. We've never seen that anywhere in the country. With the Eastern District, Southern District, and Western District all nominated. And for people that understand the process, the senators of the states in question are the ones that make the recommendation to the president and the attorney general. If that senator makes that recommendation, it is rare that that recommendation is not given. So we are on the precipice of at least 2, if not 3, blacks in charge of the Southern District, the Eastern District, and the Western District of New York. That has never happened again, and it's a template for you around the country. We want people of color in the U.S. Attorney's Office over these federal cases. Give him another hand. Now let us hear from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
Hello. It is my privilege to join the members and friends of the National Action Network for this wonderful gathering and to celebrate your 30 years of inspiring transformative action and activism. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for your visionary leadership and for your decades of persistent, courageous work to lift up our communities and move our nation closer toward a more perfect union. Let me especially salute the National Action Network's California chapter members. Every day, your energy and activism strengthen our beautiful state. For 3 decades, the network has been a powerful voice for progress. Your energy, organization, and mobilization have been vital in our fight for justice, equality, and dignity for all. Sadly, for over a year, the pandemic and economic crisis have inflicted a devastating toll on the health and economic stability of our nation, particularly in communities of color. Happily, today, I am able to say, help is here. The American Rescue Plan delivers robust relief to put vaccines in arms, money in pockets, children safely back in school, and workers in jobs. And it does so in a way that emphasizes equity and justice, ensuring vulnerable families, schools, and minority-owned businesses hit hardest have the resources to build back better. Indeed, justice is at the heart of all Democrats' work in Congress as we advance our agenda to combat blatant racist voter suppression tactics and to finally confront the systemic injustice and police brutality that have devastated communities of color. To fulfill this mission, we once again passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to fundamentally transform policing in America and save lives. To safeguard every American's sacred right to be heard at the ballot box, House Democrats passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, the most significant voting rights and democracy reform in more than half a century. Next, we'll be passing H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But to get these historic bills across the finish line, our unified democratic government relies on your energy and activism. We need the network's brilliant, persistent outside mobilization in order to enact our bold, transformative agenda for the people. In this work, let us also draw faith and inspiration from the closing words of Amanda Gorman's inaugural poem. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Together, we will bravely protect our most vulnerable families and renew our nation's bedrock promise of justice, equality, and opportunity for all. On behalf of the United States Congress, thank you, National Action Network, for all that you do to build a brighter future. And thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for your outstanding leadership.
Give a hand, Speaker Pelosi. And now, before I bring on the first panel, the Attorney General of the United States of America, Attorney General Judge Garland, Merrick Garland.
Thank you for the work you do every day to help ensure equal justice under law. I am very pleased to speak with you today. The National Action Network's website prominently proclaims that it works within the spirit and tradition of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. In that spirit, let us remember Dr. King's famous admonition, "It is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for all people." Today, that admonition guides the work of the United States Department of Justice. As I said in my opening statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Attorney General is the lawyer not for any individual, but for the people of the United States, and that means all the people of the United States. The Civil Rights Division, created by the Civil Rights Act of 1957, is the tip of the spear of the Justice Department's effort to ensure justice for all people. That is why we have sought a substantial increase in the division's budget, as well as the budget of a complementary component, the Community Relations Service, which was authorized by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Money, however, is not enough. Dedicated, experienced leadership is also needed. That is why the President nominated Vanita Gupta to be the Associate Attorney General, the department's third highest position, and Kristen Clark to be the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Civil Rights Division. I do not need to recount their qualifications to you. Both are veteran civil rights lawyers, and both are highly respected alumni of the department's Civil Rights Division. I meant it when I told the Senate Judiciary Committee that they have skills that I do not have, and they have experiences that I do not have. And I meant it when I said I needed both of them and their experiences and skills to be successful as Attorney General. We are doing everything within our power to get them confirmed. In the meantime, the Civil Rights Division is already hard at work on a long agenda. It is stepping up its efforts to ensure the right to vote. It is combating discrimination in areas from housing to education to employment. And it will work hard to ensure accountability for law enforcement misconduct. It will also prioritize investigating whether government agencies are engaging in patterns or practices that deprive individuals of their federal or constitutional rights. And it is redoubling its effort to investigate and prosecute hate crimes. Indeed, one of my first acts as Attorney General was to mandate a 30-day expedited review to determine how the department can ensure that it makes the best and most effective use of its resources to combat hate. Now, the Civil Rights Division may be the tip of the spear, but our commitment to equal justice is a whole-of-department effort. That effort will involve work by our grant-making components to help police departments around the country improve their practices through funding and technical assistance, leverage to promote policing policies that benefit communities and enhance trust. Our equal justice effort will also involve work by the department's criminal components to help reform the justice system and end mass incarceration. This means revamping charging policies to give prosecutors discretion to make charges and consequent sentences proportional to the crime and to the damage it does. And it means looking anew at our First Step Act policies to ensure the maximum degree of retroactive sentencing reduction authorized by the Act. Our efforts will also involve work by the Bureau of Prisons, both to ensure that the rehabilitation promises of the First Step Act are met and that the use of private prison facilities is eliminated. And our efforts will involve the work of our Office of Legislative Affairs to actively support the administration's ambitious agenda to ensure racial justice. Finally, I must emphasize the danger we face from domestic violent extremism, and in particular, from violent extremists who are racially motivated. The FBI director has rightly testified that such extremism is a top threat priority for the Bureau. Combating it is a top priority of mine. When the President-elect announced my nomination as Attorney General, I recounted that the Department of Justice was founded in the midst of Reconstruction, with its first principal task to ensure compliance with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. As historian Ron Chernow wrote, the new Justice Department would forge its identity in the battle to slay the first incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan. In that battle, the department successfully deployed its considerable resources to ensure civil rights, which were under militant attack. I promise you that today, 150 years later, the Justice Department will once again deploy all of its considerable resources to ensure, in the words of Dr. King, justice for all people.